Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webcast, Why MSSPs are Enhancing SOC as a Service. In today's presentation, our experts will show you how a SOC can help augment your team and how by optimizing SOC functions, you can stay ahead of today's cyber criminals. On today's webcast, we'll begin with a basic look at the SOC, the responsibilities of analysts, and what you should look for in a SOC. Following that, Madhu will run through the challenges companies are facing in 2021 and give some insight into how attackers are exploiting these challenges. He'll then share his personal insights and technical expertise into how a SOC can help you and your customers overcome these challenges, along with some real-life cases of the SOC stopping attacks. Next, Mike will explain how those items we think you should look for in a SOC are able to enhance and grow the services that come from your SOC, plus some insight into the total cost of ownership of a co-managed versus DIY SOC. Finally, we'll finish up with a summary, and Mike and Madhu will answer all your questions. Just a quick note on our presenters. Madhu Vasudevan is the Director of SOC Operations for Neturian and has the day-to-day expertise of how it works and how it can help you and your customers stay safe. Mike Ohanian is the VP of Product Management for Neturian, and his goal is to make cybersecurity usable and understandable by all via simple, easy-to-learn design instead of the strictly data-driven days of old. So to get us started, I'm going to turn it over to Madhu.
Thank you, David. So to begin with, I'm going to just start with the SOC responsibilities. What are the functions that needs to exist in a given SOC, right? Like we have functions like the L1, L2s, and L3s, and then which has been supported by a project team and also being managed by SOC head. So these are the vital functions that we need to have in a given SOC. Now, what are they? I mean, in a nutshell, if you see, the level 1 is the first level of triage and the analysis that typically the analyst would do for threat hunting. And that's further reviewed by the L2s, which are the senior people, and then further finalized and validated by L3s. These things needs to be done because we need to be absolutely sure that what we are reporting is intact, and we have the supporting evidence for that, which corroborates the story of the find. So we have to be absolutely sure that we don't produce any false positives or anything. So that's an essential item. The project teams will deliver the data trending using different tools, and they also give us a 360-degree view on monthly basis or on a weekly basis, depends on the kind of subscription model they opt for. And of course, it needs to be guarded by a SOC manager or a SOC head who will be the point of contact for all the escalations and management of the entire function. So that in a nutshell is the SOC responsibility. But the key element here is hiring process, right? Like, so a person with complete passion and the guy who is completely focused on threat hunting, and he is getting all kind of excitement when he finds an anomalies. That kind of a person is what we have to look for during the hiring process, right? Like even when we do it, when we do the threat hunting, and we get a complete satisfaction when we find an anomaly, right? And we give a high five and things like that. So the kind of hiring is also important while we choose our analyst. And that's something which we have to keep in mind while we choose our analyst for the SOC. So given that context, I will move on to the next slide. The next slide talks about what should you look for in a SOC. Typically, what should be there in a SOC. So the monthly meetings, like the interaction with the customers, the end stakeholders, and what has been seen in a month and what is the value that they have obtained is something that we have to keep looking at, and that needs to be projected so that they see value for money. And also all the enhancements and the optimizations that we have produced and we have developed over a period of time needs to be showcased in a typical executive review meeting so that they see value for money, right? And they also get the confidence that they are in the safe hands, and people are, I mean, there are a group of person or group of people who are watching their environment for any nefarious actors or any bad players who is trying to sneak into the environment. So that's quite important to give that kind of overview on a monthly basis, and also keep producing the enhancements and optimizations. Now, The other thing which will be a benefit for a SOC is having an in-house engineering group on a product group, because when something goes wrong and when the product just fails to deliver as expected, having an in-house engineering and a product group would ensure that the resolution of that issue is being addressed in a quicker manner. And we don't have to wait for days together. And that's the kind of advantage when you have an in-house product group and an engineering group. Now, we also have to consider the defense in-depth integrations. For instance, all the important technology which is guarding the perimeter needs to be ingested into the SIM tool so that we are not blind, or the analyst is not blind to the logs. So what we see is what we infer. So we need to be absolutely sure that all those defense in-depth technologies are ingested, and we watch for every alert, important alert, which is directly proportional to the cybersecurity function, and we infer at the right time. So that's important. Now, it's also important to establish the threat hunting procedures or the standard operating procedures, which is important for the analyst. It's like a navigation tool, right? Like when something happens, what should he do? Especially for the junior guys, it should be more of a checklist kind of thing, because we should not expect advanced side of things, but they have to follow standard procedures. And for that, we need to establish those procedures. And that's an essential thing in a SOC. Now comes the risk management. Risk management pertaining to the monitoring, like for instance, if there are things which are going to handicap us in providing the monitoring services, for instance, in integration is missing, there are systems which are not reporting, all those things contributes to the miss of an anomaly. Like we might not be able to find it because of all these underlying factors. So it's important to establish a risk management process which carries the risk register, which has all the essential inputs, needs to be spoken out to the stakeholders, needs to be discussed, and either the risk must be mitigated, transferred, or accepted, so that if anything happens in the future, we are sure that we are tracking this and we are not in jeopardy of not monitoring the things in time. So that's also an essential thing that needs to be established. Now, continuous analyst training is also an important component, because analysts, because of the ever-growing threats and the ever-changing landscape in the security world, these analysts need to be on top of things which are emerging. Every day there's something new that's happening. So analysts needs to know how to find those things. They have to look for keywords. It's not that easy for them to, analyze and infer things if it is something which is going to be more of a coding side of things. So that's something which we have to do in a SOC function on a continuous basis. Run books are an essential thing because it carries all the exceptions and exclusions, all the important factors for performing the monitoring function. So that's an important document, which should be a living document, needs to be updated at all times. So that needs to be established as well. And it needs to be maintained with version control and whatnot. So it contains all the things which the analyst has to go through so that he doesn't produce any redundant input while he produces the reports or while he produces his inputs for the monitoring function. And MITRE ATT&CK integration is the very important component because of the evolving 0 days and failure of a lot of technology-based defenses. MITRE helps us to understand the patterns, because the analyst will immediately recognize the patterns when they see certain tactics, techniques, and procedures being touched by a particular system, and then there is a pattern being recognized. So the moment they see the pattern, they will be able to say, oh, okay, this is the thing that could have happened. Like for instance, if there is a ransomware, there are certain techniques that it touches, and immediately the analyst is trained in such a way that he understands those patterns, even though the traditional defense in depth or the technologies have failed to recognize the pattern or recognize the files or any 0-day attacks. So that's an important thing in a SOC. Now comes the endpoint security. Yeah, having said that, the traditional AVs only looks for certain things, certain parameters. The endpoint security is heuristic, and it will be looking for the behavior analytics, and it will be looking for more of a pattern-based matching where it can easily find out some of the things which is not found by the other defense in depth. So like when I say defense in depth, it's like firewalls and the AVs and the IDS, IPS, and etc. Now, today's challenges, what typically is the challenge that's been faced by a given company, right? There's always a shortage of skills, and the staff are overworked because of a lot of other functions that they do, and they could not augment the SOC services because of not having a dedicated set of eyes or dedicated team to look into. The false positives is a big challenge because SIM gets around millions and billions of logs. It's always hard to find any anomaly because it's finding a needle from a haystack. So finding the needle is a big challenge for a given SIM solution. So that's increased false positives. We know the way to counter that, but I will cover that in the next few slides. Important processes being overlooked, which means that some of the things like the patch management things and the other, the application control policies, the AV policies and other things which needs to be fine-tuned and tweaked at regular intervals could be overlooked, which might cause the anomaly or the bad players to sneak in. The other thing is with regards to the evolving threats, like for instance, the advanced persistent threats, which is actually taking shape because of the remote workforce, which we are in this period of COVID, where everybody is working remotely. They are using this particular scenario to sneak in by using the advanced persistent threat techniques. So these are the common challenges or the predominant challenges that we regularly face while we have to maintain the security in a given infrastructure. How attackers exploit these challenges. So basically, evading the antivirus. So as I said, the traditional antivirus looks for only the functions and strings. So if they have a specific pattern, they immediately recognize that they've stopped the file. But these days, the bad players are so advanced in their thought process that they can, play around with the files. Like for instance, using PowerShell, they can distort the malicious file. And they can evade the antivirus. Antivirus will not recognize it. They will distort it and they will obfuscate it, and it will be split into parts. So the AV doesn't recognize it. Maybe one or two files it might recognize, but it would not recognize the entire pattern. So that's another challenge to find, right? And that's where the SOC comes in, the pattern recognition comes in, and the SOC-as-a-Service helps you. Zero-day attacks, like nobody actually goes with the known bad IPs, and nobody goes with the known bad hash processes or the hash values so that you can just find it out from the threat intel sources and immediately raise the flag. But these days they are, so smart that they can actually use the zero-day IP addresses and zero-day hashes, and they evade the defense mechanism that we have in place. So that's a big challenge, and there is a way to get around that. I will talk through that in the next few slides. User behavior is an important thing. Spear phishing attack is increasing, and the educational program is important for them to understand that they should not be clicking on any of the bad files or the bad emails or links which are coming in, and then the macro-enabled documents and things like that, which actually enables the nefarious players to sneak into the environment. So that's another thing. Bad policies, yes, the loosely written policies in any given technology, the AV policies, the DLPs, or the firewall policies, all those things contribute to the anomalies to increase. Unpatched servers, especially the ones which are facing the internet, like the ones which are placed in DMZ, that's also a gap, and that's also something which the bad players use. For instance, I'm going to touch base on Hafnium soon, but that's one classic example that I can tell you that some of the companies were affected and they have used the vulnerability to sneak into the environment and cause enough damage. One such example which I would say is recently I just read that the Acer was hit by this Hafnium exploit, and the bad players were looking for $50 million, which is a huge sum, and literally threatening them that if you don't pay, I'm going to expose you. So they actually use this vulnerability to inject a ransomware, right? So it's that dangerous. So that's typically the challenges that we pose in today's security world. Overcoming the challenges, how do we do that? In a SOC, how do we typically do that, right? The important thing is efficient threat hunting. So the more we are efficient with that, and what are the things which contributes to efficient threat hunting is something which I'm going to touch base in the next few slides, one or two slides. And these are important components for threat hunting and ensuring that we find the anomalies in time. So that's important. The early detection is always a boon for any customer or the stakeholders. So identified threat indicators, the identification of the initial tip-off by an analyst is a very important or a pivotal aspect of threat hunting. So for that, they need to be looking at the right places. They need to know what to look for and what to report and how to do the initial triage to come to a conclusion that, yes, this has happened. So that's something which we need to be mindful about. The next one is the log inference. As I said, what we see is what we infer. If they don't know how to infer the logs, they're not going to find anything and they're not going to get anywhere. So that's an important aspect. The logs needs to be read in such a way that they understand what has been written, especially the ones like PowerShells where the encoded commands are there. And if they don't know how to decode it and they don't know how to read it, for instance, if they have the hidden value in the PowerShell and if they have no profile and if they don't have the FQDN names in the PowerShell, they wouldn't know if they don't know how to infer it, that it is actually a suspicious thing and something bad is going to happen. So that needs to be taught and that needs to be learned by the analyst at all times. So log inference plays a very critical part. Now comes the correlation. Once you find all these things, you should know how to connect the missing dots and what to look for. Like for instance, if there is a unsuccessful logon attempt, and you have to immediately see whether there is any successful logon attempt after that. And even after that, did it follow the cyber chain, right? Like for instance, did it enter into the network? And if it has a process which is actually trying to connect to the C2 servers, all these kind of things needs to be done because the end goal of a bad player is to exfiltrate the data, infiltrate and exfiltrate. Now that needs to be thoroughly understood by the analyst, and they need to understand that this missing dots needs to be connected, and they should know that to go from the initial tip-off that they receive. Now comes the the incident response. They should know how to respond to the incident, follow the call tree, talk to the customer, tell them, alert them, and put the red flag in saying that, hey, this has happened, you have to act on it quickly. So that needs to happen, and they have to follow the incident response procedures, which a SOC should typically have and should be built. Now come the recommendations. What are the mitigation plan? What are the things that they have to do once the compromise has happened? Those things needs to be very clearly narrated to the customer or the end user so that they can take right actions. And that's an important aspect of an analyst and a SOC function. Now, continuous monitoring is even after the compromise has completed, we need to keep monitoring on continuous basis to ensure that nothing happens and no recon attempt again comes in from a different IP address or a different way or a method and tries to sneak in. Because once found, you will be targeted. So the continuous monitoring is a very important thing to be done, even though the compromise is contained. All right, these are the other two things that we have to be considering very important for threat hunting, which is to increase the efficiency of a SIM, the noise filtering needs to be done, which means that we need to arrest the noises, like for instance, the informational or the error logs, because these logs will engulf the entire SIM platform. And the bad players or the logs of the bad players would be hiding behind these logs. It's very hard to find when you have millions of logs or thousands of logs. So it needs to be tuned continuously. And this is a continuous function of SOC. We need to tune it continuously. And then comes the product tuning updates. And we need to even tune the product in such a way that the configurations are altered. If there is an increase in the number of devices which is reporting out to the SIM solution, we need to do some configuration change or architecture change. And we have to keep applying the updates, which actually would speed up the solution. And that's an important thing as well. And then comes the integration. I spoke about that briefly in the previous slide, that we have to integrate all the devices as much as we can, which are important from a cybersecurity perspective. And comes the disk space forecasting. Keep an eye on the disk space, because the moment the disk fills up, we're going to lose the logs after that. So we have to keep an eye, and we have to have this right sort of alerts for that, and we have to take actions in time. Now comes the IOC updates. The emerging and evolving threats, there should be a threat hunting team which needs to be on top of all the IOCs which are making rounds in the security world, like looking at some of the websites like US CERT or any kind of website which gives a good insight on the evolving and emerging threats. And we have to keep updating those IOCs so that the SIM platform would actually find all of that in time and report it out to us so we can, to the bare minimum, stop the known bad players, right? So that's the important aspect of threat hunting as well. Now, on the right side, if you see, there are different aspects that the analyst would use. Like, for instance, they will use reports, alerts, the correlation rules, and things like that. All combined together, they have to perform this function day in and day out to ensure that all the threat hunting is comprehensive enough, and they are able to, find the bad players, and they don't miss out on anything, and they don't overlook on things. So this needs to be followed by the analyst at all times, and that's again a very important aspect of a SOC function. Right. Now, when all of these things, which I touched base in the past 2 slides, all of these things have been established, and we infer a lot of things on continuous basis. These things need to be incepted out to the SOAR platform, which means that all the known security issues, or the ones which we detected in the past, need not be performed again and again by the analyst, consuming his time or her time. So needs to go into the SOAR platform so that the time consumed is less, and he don't have to perform this again and again. He just have to go through the known stuff in the SOAR platform and produce the inputs to the customer right away. So that's an important aspect of establishing a SOAR platform. We can achieve that by using the external tools or Jupyter notebooks, or having the Yara rules inbuilt on Sigma rules and things like that. We can do all sort of things, and combined effort of all these things would give a comprehensive SOAR platform for us. So that's an important aspect as well. This will also ensure that the time consumed in detection goes down substantially. So that's another thing which we have to keep in mind. So this contributes, or this would be the things that is required for effective threat hunting. Right. Now comes the last 2 slides from my side. It would be the catches, like what we have done. So we have incorporated whatever we spoke about in the past few slides in our SOC service, which actually helped us to find out the most recent Hafnium vulnerability in the Exchange servers, even before it was released as an advisory on March 1st week. We found an anomaly before March 1st week, which is, I would say, the end of February, in a particular customer. We found that there were some enumeration attempts, and there were arbitrary codes which was injected into the Exchange environment, which was vulnerable. Now, the moment we saw that there was an application which was actually sent out to the Exchange server, and that application was @find.exe, and then it started doing the command executions, and in a given time interval. Now, we also further saw that there were the Chinese chopper variants, or the extensions were used, like the .bat file. We saw the .bat file command executions in the Exchange servers. That actually gave us a complete understanding that, okay, something bad is happening. We also have some of the P1 alerts, which will also help us in finding these things. We kept all of these things in mind, and we have developed the P1 alerts for our SOC, for the customers, where it will find the suspicious PowerShell, it will find the AD enumeration, it will find the exploit tools. So with the exploit tool alert, we got the initial tip-off where it says there was a program called @find. @find is basically for the enumeration, credential dumping, and things like that. And then we were able to proceed from there. Like, we were able to correlate, and we were able to dig deep. We performed a log sweep, and thereby we immediately informed the customer. The customer took actions immediately. Now, we also saw one of the username was trying to be compromised. So we also informed that the username is getting compromised because of the enumeration attempts. And we told the customer that, hey, this is happening. He immediately reset the passwords, and he also, patched the servers immediately, removed the unnecessary programs, and the major issue was averted, right? So it could have actually been, detrimental for them. It would have caused a very big compromise, but we were able to find this in time. And actually, without even knowing that this is Hafnium, we were able to find it because of the controls, detection controls that we had using the alerts, the Lucene queries, and the report functions in Event Tracker. So that's how we were able to neutralize this, and we were able to recommend all the solutions in time. for this happening. So that's one of the catch which we were able to produce in the recent past. The next one is with regards to the emotet, which we were able to find it using the EDR function, right? So for instance, the moment we saw the hash value, which is matching with emotet, we were able to find the bad files. The emotet is actually a dropper. It's like a worm. So it actually, when it comes to the environment, it uses a payload dropper functionality called StrictBot, and then it will lead to inject the Yuk ransomware as well. So these three things goes hand in hand, and they go, they are directly proportional to each other. For instance, emotet is where it starts, and then it carries over to the TrickBot, and then it further goes to the Yuk ransomware. Now, emotet was found using the hash value, and we were able to stop it at the early stages by identifying it, and were able to report it to the customer. And and thereby we averted a larger compromise. It would have been really bad if the TrickBot and the Yuk ransomware would have been injected. Now, what happens in TrickBot is it has got the capability of even stopping the services in an AV. So it can stop, it can do the task kill, it can stop the services, which means that I've seen that in a demonstration that it can, the moment it compromises all the AV services, the defense in-depth technology services, which is AV, the EDR, everything would be stopped, right? Like not the EDR, but the AV services would be stopped. Now, that would actually not help us in any way, right? Because the AV is the protection mechanism that we have. But eventually, if the services are stopped, then we cannot do anything. It has the capability of even stopping the agents of the SIM solution as well. So it is that powerful. So we were able to find this, and we were able to inform to the customer, and the major compromise or a major anomaly was avoided in time. So that's something which we have done in the recent past. And apart from that, I think, these catches and other things are the daily function for us, and we get a huge satisfaction the moment we find an anomaly. So with that, I think I'm going to pass the mic out to Mike. So over to you.
All right, Madhu, thank you very much. What I'd like to run through now is essentially, how does this all tie together? Obviously, Madhu did an outstanding job kind of running us through the nuts and bolts and how things work and what's being performed behind the scenes and the true value that the security operations center, that the SOC performs for our customers. But I want to put it all together from a couple different perspectives as well. First, how a managed platform will even enhance a SOC. So obviously, it's a layered approach. It's a very valuable layered approach. You have managed services, the 24/7 SOC, as Madhu spelled out, the continuous monitoring MDR, a overall cloud platform that leverages things like SIM and deep learning, empowering the personnel with some outstanding tools to ensure that safety 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And then, of course, also security controls are leveraged there in the middle. You have intrusion detection systems, vulnerability management to get a sense of more predictability. And holistically, this provides truly a valuable security service, keeping you safe at all times. But you might be thinking, this is complex. This is unmatched scalability and flexibility. When you extrapolate all these layers, it gives us this ability to flex and scale the technology combined with the human aspect to really meet those nuanced needs to small and mid-sized organizations. But you're probably thinking, okay, this is very complex. Everything that we heard from Madhu, a proven cybersecurity expert with years of experience, you might be thinking, well, okay, now what? How do we get this done? One thing I really want to look at next is kind of the total cost of ownership. For approximately, say, a mid-market 250 device organization. And on the left, if you decided that everything that was talked about by Madhu is valuable, and you're kind of going, wow, it's true, this is so much more than just technology, we need a little more in this. I want to do this on my own. I want to take this task on. You build it out yourself. You have the different spends here for the infrastructure and the IT software. But most importantly, look at the second one from the bottom, staff expenses. Again, that 24/7 security operations center with analysts, supervisors, and so forth. And look at that large expenditure. Now on the right, the SOC-as-a-Service model, which is what we offer, look at the difference there. Getting close to 9-10x difference. And primarily, of course, it's because you're taking on the entire MTP, or Managed Threat Protection Service package, which is taking all your costs for IT software, infrastructure software, and the staff expenses, and roll those into a complete service package or as a service offering. The approximate $90,500 cost is a blend of all those items on the left, aside from essentially onboarding and training. So if you roll those into a service and you receive that service and you still have that same outcome, all of those potential large-scale expenses that would have been on your shoulders first are now combined into a economic solution that's a lot better for customers from a cost standpoint. And then, as you can see, you'll still get the exact same service, you'll get the same responsiveness, you'll even have the same software, but for fractions of the cost. So why Event Tracker Managed Threat Protection? We've kind of gone through the interworkings and the importance and the key concepts of a SOC. We've just quickly discussed how it's, in addition to a cybersecurity offering that keeps you safe, it's also an economic offering. But at the end of the day, when you blend these two together, no one really knows the world of the platform and putting it all together better than an offering like Event Tracker's Managed Threat Protection. It combines that service, it combines that technology, and it focuses more than just on one singular aspect. It doesn't just focus on looking at or updating configurations or receiving logs. It focuses on the entire threat plane, the prediction component, leveraging deep learning, leveraging things like vulnerability management to hopefully secure up or shore up your defensive posture even before something happens, and then preventing that once an attack does happen. How truly strong is your defensive posture? Having those personnel that not only detect and remediate response, but also stand up that infrastructure for you. The Security Operations Center that we provide works with you to understand your specific cybersecurity needs. Then, if things do happen, because we live in the world that there is no such thing as perfect prevention, how to detect those. Again, with a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week Security Operations Center, leveraging an outstanding tool like Event Tracker, the blend of expertise and technology really starts to put the whole picture together. So when things do happen to come through, how do you mitigate those risks? How do you minimize the damage? How do you detect it? And then, of course, how do you respond? We have customized incident response plans. Again, our Security Operations Center works with you. It's not an over-the-fence type of model where it's just a detached communication set. We're actually working with you in a very close relationship. And together, this delivers that integrated defense in-depth capability to ensure that all these stages of cybersecurity maturity are met and exceeded. Of course, the biggest thing to understand as you kind of go through this journey and understanding the true value is that at the end of the day, the technology is just the tip of the iceberg. Event Tracker as a software, it's great, it's broad, it's security information event management, it's SIM, detection and response. But ultimately, there's a lot of different options you have out in the marketplace for these types of things that are do-it-yourself. And that's only about 30%. Obviously, no one knows our technology better than us. We're the biggest users and the biggest consumers via our Security Operations Center. But the technology itself is just the tip of the iceberg. If you were to take an off-the-shelf solution out there in the marketplace and try to do it yourself, you're really only covering a small portion of the overall defensive posture you need for being truly secure. Below the waterline is where things really start to come together. The managed security service, the concept of, wow, this is difficult, this is hard. If I'm not watching it 24 hours a day, what happens when an overnight attack comes in? Just like with physical attacks, if there was a bank robbery, for example, typically they're not going to oftentimes try to break into the vault behind the scenes during normal business hours. Sure, you might have some guy come in here and there to the teller, but if you're really trying to do a secretive big name heist, you're gonna do that when people are sleeping. That's definitely a challenge with just technology. The managed security service component of it really ties it all together to offer that 24-hour-a-day protection, so you can sleep soundly at night. Like I said, and tying it together with detection response, a tailored security playbook that we would alert you and call you to your needs if a particular type of event or indicator of compromise comes in. That's working with you as a customer. So you start to put all that together below just the cybersecurity technology waterline, and you really get this holistic offering that really mitigates risks and provides a thorough service. And then lastly, of course, there's that collaboration. It's not just simply install the technology, stand up the technology infrastructure, and then start providing the service. There is the IT administration as well, the complete remediation, the recommendations that we would make to you, system recovery, and even executive sponsorship. And on top of that, when you have it as a managed security service, it behooves us as the provider to have that kind of internal socialization aspect. And what do I mean by that? The personnel side of everything that we provide learns and grows. If we see a threat that's out there on customer A's site, it behooves us to ensure that that threat is communicated throughout our organization, so that when a different analyst sees it on customer B's site, we already know how to handle it. We know what that risk looks like. And that provides a broader cybersecurity outcome to all of our customers. So when we put all this together, that collaboration, that human element, it really gets the whole picture below, just like I said, that cybersecurity technology waterline. When we focus on that sharing specifically, we're a company of 325 employees. We have 2 NOCs, Network Operations Centers, 2 SOCs, Security Operations Centers, and we protect approximately 20,000 business locations, under 1 million endpoints under management. And we see, like Madhu had previously mentioned, about 6 billion logged events per day. And that's events. On top of all the information that we have to comb through and investigate and look through with respect to just logs themselves, there are a lot of things that that our eyes are watching. And lastly, of course, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of indicators of compromise that we see. Not every single event that comes to our systems and comes to the eyes of an analyst is naturally a threat. But that human element will investigate that and make sure that we're not getting false alert or false positive fatigue. So hundreds of indicators of compromise, true indicators of compromise, make it to us that we investigate and potentially act on. So to wrap it all up, obviously with us, with Asurion, it's just unmatched scalability, not only just the fiscal or economic component of having SOC as a service, but the fact that it expands and grows with you. Having this cybersecurity as a managed service is truly a valuable proposition. The managed platform approach delivers the right amount of expertise and technology. Like I said, we have our manned SOC of proven cybersecurity experts that don't really have much of a learning curve. They live and they eat and they breathe this. And they provide that with a technology that we have made, that it's our own internal IP. We're not third-partying the primary technology. Managed threat protection to predict, prevent, detect, and respond. Like I said, kind of looking at that entire threat plane from the different steps of a threat or a breach, and trying to ensure that we have all the bases covered, not just one sliver of it. The dedicated SOC for the threat intel, the monitoring, and of course the forensics. It's not just simply looking at a flashing light on a dashboard saying, oh, look, there's a threat. Sometimes you have to investigate. Sometimes you have to investigate some indicators of compromise to see a threat's coming. Sometimes you have to investigate after the fact. And of course, we're trusted by managed service security providers, managed service providers, and other technologies of the like. We are oftentimes the provider to the providers that heroes like Madhu behind the scenes are really kind of have their eyes on the screens, finger on the keyboards, that ultimately ensure that that service is provided to the MSPs and MSSPs, so they, at the end of the day, can be heroes themselves to their customers, providing that thorough, holistic cybersecurity protection that their customers want. And that wraps up my portion. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much, Mike. Thanks so much, Madhu. We're going to move into the question section now. We do have a number of them that have come in, but if you have any additional ones you would like to ask, please enter them in the questions tab and we'll get those out to Mike and Madhu. Let's start off with this one. I believe this one will be for you, Madhu. Can you help us augment a SOC we already have but doesn't provide all the services you talked about?
Yeah, so we have the services that we provide. We can actually help the MSP providers, like for instance, if the out of office hours, like they have to do continuous monitoring for 24/7, that's something which we can help. They can do the daily threat hunting. They can consider us as the extended SOC team, and we can collaboratively work with them and ease out their side of things of not, performing the threat hunting things on a daily basis, not picking up the IOCs, which we will be looking for, not worrying about the emerging and evolving threats, which is like the kind of things like the sunburst and hafnium things that has happened. We keep an eye on all of that. So things like that can be used as a service from our side. We also ensure that we produce the 360-degree view of what has happened in the past, and we also keep telling them on what are the new things or the optimizations that they have to do at regular intervals. So all these things will add value, and finding an anomaly which is like, which has been, like for example, Acer has been hit and they spend a substantial amount of money to recover from that. Those things can be avoided if we have a SOC which is having a continuous eye or a continuous monitoring that's been done. And that helps any environment, any given environment, because avoiding security incident is the pivotal aspect, right? So because if there is a compromise, it would contribute to the monetary loss, reputation loss, and unnecessary, time spent in investigating the incident and things like that. So those things can be leveraged using the SOC-as-a-Service from our side. So in a nutshell, I think it will be a big benefit to have a dedicated team and can be considered as an extension of their SOC team and work as a team in a collaborative manner.
Okay, thanks so much, Madhu. I think that answered another question that had come in about why they would need more than Monday through Friday coverage. So I think you definitely covered on that. So I appreciate that. Mike, this question will be for you. How did you go about integrating MITRE ATT&CK?
Yeah, so into the Event Tracker console, to the software itself, we integrated a MITRE ATT&CK dashboard to ensure that the primary threat-based techniques, not all of them, some of them are excluded. We don't necessarily capture for things related to pen testing, but the primary threat tactics and techniques are integrated into a clean and easy to use user workflow dashboard that essentially will, for lack of a better word, light up when one of those techniques is detected by our system. Obviously, our system is monitoring logs 24 hours a day. And then on top of that, within that dashboard, it actually identifies the endpoint so that you can go into the dashboard should there be some kind of technique that lit up, and then click on that endpoint and see the actual logs, the events, time that it happened, and so forth. So in summary, we integrated all of the most of the threat techniques and tactics that MITRE keeps and puts out right into the software itself. It's not a third-party thing. It's not an additional tool that you have to buy. It's right into the console that you get access to, that our SOC has access to. And like I said, it's interactive, that you can play with it and you can drill down into more data for simplistic threat hunting. So right into the console, great solution. And we've definitely seen lots of interest, a lot of success with it thus far.
All right, that's fantastic to hear. I am looking through here. A lot of the questions were on the same topic in terms of the SOC and how we could enhance or help with a smaller SOC that the MSP already had. Madhu, do you want to get any further into depth into what can happen with a SOC that's just has coverage Monday through Friday? Any more information you can share on that? Why would they need more than that? I think is kind of what they're looking for.
Right. Yeah. So absolutely. So the thing is, Monday to Friday, there is no guarantee that the compromise wouldn't happen on a weekend or out of office hours, right? So it can happen at any given time. The actors would not prefer a particular time to attack, and they can attack at any time. So it's always good to have 24/7 services and have a dedicated team watching for any anomalies in a given environment, especially the ones where after office hours is the time when they target most of the organizations, and not during the business hours, because they know they have people who are watching for certain things. But if you have a SOC which is going to be 24/7 and have a monitoring solution which is going to be 24/7, all those alerts and monitoring of those alerts would be a good coverage for them, and that would actually protect them for any kind of a disaster or any kind of a big compromise that would lead in a big loss or monetary loss or any kind of a reputational damage. Because these days everything comes into the news and it becomes just famous. Like Acer is one of the big players, so they are overnight they become famous for the wrong things, for the wrong news. So those things can be avoided, and it's always good to have a 24/7 services, having a person who is, or a team of people who are looking for the compromise or any kind of alerts that they have to look into at all times. So in a nutshell, it's best to have 24/7 services with a dedicated team, and can be considered, our SOC team can be considered as the extended team, and we always like to maintain that relationship with the MSPs at all times and act on their behalf.
All right, thanks so much, Madhu. Did have a question just come in terms of the analyst training, like continuous analyst training. How often do we need updated analyst training?
So there are different parts to it. So the first thing is we have a structured training program of every week where we do a brainstorming and a group discussion. These days, it's all happening virtually. We come up with different topics and we talk about it, just like the way we are doing a webinar. And then we also give in topics for people who we would like them to research. So we ask them to do a research on that and then come back with all the inputs. And then the important things is we will ask them, how will you find or give the examples of the logs which will lead you to this particular find, right? Like you give us the evidence that says or demonstrates that, okay, these logs put together will correlate and corroborate my find. So if they can demonstrate that, then we know that they have the knowledge. But if they stumble, we chime in and we say that, okay, this is not the way, this is the direction that you have to take, and these are the gaps in your understanding. So this happens every week. And then when there is a big breakout or an incident, we huddle up in a call immediately and we brainstorm about this. We talk about it. We prepare a case study. We publish the case study to all the people. They go through that. And sometimes we even prepare videos for the people to go through it on a continuous basis. We also update solutions for any of the recurring issues. So these are the different artifacts and different methods that we use to train an analyst, also bring them up to speed. So once again, a great question. And as I said, employee training and the analyst training is a very key factor for the success of the entire SOC operation.
All right. Well, thank you both very much. Thanks for all the information you shared today. That's all the time we have for questions for now. If any of we didn't get into, we will reach out to you with a direct answer afterwards. But we really appreciate all the expertise you brought, both of you, Mike and Madhu. Great insights. If you have any other interest in hearing or seeing a demo of our SOC as a service, or seeing any more of our catches of the day that the SOC has completed, you can find all that stuff, info on netshurian.com, or you can email us at soc@netshurian.com to get a demo scheduled. So that is all we have for today. Thank you both very much. Thanks to everyone who attended. So have a great rest of your day, everyone.